I've seen the difference in leaders that approach things holistically, mentally, physically, emotionally, to lead their people versus just surface or only business. And for me, I'd rather have that holistic approach of how are my people doing physically? How are they doing mentally? How are they doing emotionally, spiritually? All of those pieces. And when I take that approach, it's not to, tell people right or wrong or anything. No, it's to talk through where are they at and understanding how do we tease apart what's going on in their space so that they know that they are seen, that they are loved, that they are heard. Because when you do that and you meet people where they are, they're willing to go with you on a journey. And if you can show that on the journey, it is okay to connect with one another and to respect and love one another, that we then show love to other people in everything that we do and how we show up, then they'll probably go a little extra mile, right, of their delivery and support.
The function of leadership is to create more leaders, not more followers. Welcome to the Paid Forward Society, the podcast where we explore the many facets of leadership as we talk to inspiring managers, entrepreneurs, coaches, veterans, and athletes who empower their teams and deliver results. Together, we discover the keys to success through empathy, purpose, and care. I'm your host, Romain Jourdan. I have been leading distributed teams for almost 10 years, and I continue to practice and learn how to become better at it. Jovonia Thibert, welcome to the show. You go by Joe, right?
I do go by Joe. Thank you, Roman. It's good to be here on the show with you.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I'm really excited to have you today on the Paid Forward Society. We never worked together. We don't really know each other. Actually, were kind enough to leave a comment of one of my posts about leadership, and then I looked at your profile and I say, hey, that's an impressive track record. So I'd love to connect with you, and then we chatted over LinkedIn, and here we are. So
yes, no, thank you for having me. It was refreshing to learn about your podcast and what it means to pay it forward from a leadership aspect, and even just to your point, society, community. And for me, I couldn't say no. I wanted to say yes because I feel like in my wheelhouse of what makes me tick and why I do what I do.
Perfect. So looking forward to our discussion then. So a bit more about you. So you are an engineering director at Amazon right now.
I
You have a
am.
long track record in the industry. You worked for almost 20 years at Boeing. Is that right?
Almost, yeah. It was about 18 years with the Boeing company, and it'll be 4 years in March, which is crazy. Time flies at Amazon. So been having fun, and when you're having
That's
fun,
good.
time continues to move faster.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I'm almost 4 years as well. I mean, no, next year because I joined in 2020 as well. That would be 4, but I joined in August 2020.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah. We're close. We're close.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So you have an engineering background. You
I do.
told me that you are very hands-on. You like everything, technical, hands-on. That's great.
I do. It's interesting. So this conversation, I like one-on-ones because I am an introvert that's learned to be an extrovert and times that I need to. But I'm more of uh, reserve and observing what's happening in not only the environment, but what's happening with the system, what's happening with the problem set that could be potentially solved. And that's always been my um, I guess, area of curiosity. Even as a child, my parents laughed. They were like, oh, she always wants to tinker and take stuff apart with your hands and then put it back together. But I just have a joy in that space. I also um, have a love for music.
Uh,
I did my other degree in jazz vocals in college, and
nice.
then I said, "Oh, I'll dive deeper a little bit more into engineering," and then went into business later on for an MBA.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. Okay, that's cool. I think I was just exactly the same as a child. I was always tinkering, tearing apart stuff. My mom was was shouting at me, and then I was trying to put stuff together, and then there were always additional pieces that I couldn't bring back.
Uh-huh,
but yeah,
uh-huh.
but yeah, and that still happens. But
Yeah.
that's still fun.
Oh, yes, it's definitely fun. I would say, yeah, my parents yelled as well, but then they figured, wait a minute, she actually knows how to put these things together. So I was always the one at the holidays to put, whether it's VCR or connecting things, whether it's a network or for a while, my sister, I'm the baby of four. So my sister, she had a daughter. And when she was born, she's like, can you put the crib together? Because my dad was having a hard time. So, and I was only 11. So it was fun. It was definitely fun times.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So going back to you, I mean, so you are in charge of grocery automation at Amazon. Uh, so this podcast is not about Amazon. We both work for Amazon. It's
Hmm.
more about leadership. But
Hmm.
I'd love for us to, I mean, for you to tell us more about what it means to work in grocery automation. Is that for Amazon Go, Amazon Fresh, those those brands of Amazon, or
That's a
what
good
is
question.
that about?
It's for Amazon. And so what I get a chance to lead a team that we can be curious in a space of what does it mean to have robotics and automation within a grocery fulfillment type of environment, whether it's in a fulfillment center or in stores or wherever that may look like. We're just being curious right now. And one of the things of backing up a little bit, having a chance to work with our robotics team and our fulfillment centers, I've had a chance to see how our technology is applied in other distribution locations and how we address getting to the customer faster with still high quality. And of course, safety is number one in everything that we do. So, still taking all of those principles, what does it look like to make sure we're delighting our customers? So, I get a chance to be curious in the grocery automation and robotic space now.
That's good. Wow, that's impressive. So it means that you are leading a team or teams of engineers,
Hmm.
product product
That's right. Proud of.
managers,
Hmm.
and people who are actually boots on the ground at installing those um,
That's right.
those equipments, the robotics in our fulfillment centers.
That's right. Yes, I also have some software design or development engineers as well on my team. I also get a chance to have systems engineers, and some people are like, "Well, what do systems engineers do?" And for me, the simple aspect is how do you understand the interdependencies of the holistic picture, whether it's system of systems or the actual product itself as a system. That's where hardware, software controls, everything starts to come together at that product level. And if you don't understand how things are interdependent or intertwined, then you might miss a requirement that's critical to back to our customers' requirements, right? So I love having all of those areas within the team that we get to partner with, of course, the business requirements that
Sure.
come back to the customer requirements.
Nice. All right. Thank you. Thank you for
You're
explaining that
welcome.
to us.
Yes.
I think also in our first meeting, you said that you were a Christian and that
Hmm.
helped you shape your leadership style. Can you elaborate a bit more about that?
For sure. Yes, For me, I know some people are like, oh, Christianity as a religion. And I'm like, no, for me, it's more of a relationship. And what does it mean to show love here on earth and to be light where there is some dark times and dark spaces? And I know for myself, I've seen the difference in leaders that approach things holistically, mentally, physically, emotionally, to lead their people versus just surface or only business. And for me, I'd rather have that holistic approach of how are my people doing physically? How are they doing mentally? How are they doing emotionally, spiritually? Means all of those pieces. And when I take that approach, it's not to, tell people right or wrong or anything. No, it's to
Mhm.
talk through where are they at and understanding how do we tease apart what's going on in their space so that they know that they are seen, that they are loved, that they are heard. Because when you do that and you meet people where they are, they're willing to go with you on a journey. And if you can show that on the journey, it is okay to connect with one another and to respect and love one another, that we then show love to other people and everything that we do and how we show up, then they'll probably go a little extra mile, right, of their delivery and support.
Yeah, that's true. So I think we jumped already on the topic of what makes great leaders from your point of view. I think so. Perhaps we can dive deeper on this one.
Mhm.
So, Joe, what makes a great leader?
That's a good question. I think, and the one thing we talked about before, what's the difference between a leader and a manager?
Yeah.
And I think, and some people are like, well, how do you separate the two? Not all managers are leaders,
No.
and not all leaders know how to manage requirements or project deliverables, etc. I think it takes a lot of work to manage a project. For example, you have deliverables that you need to achieve throughout the year, you have goals, you have financial commitments. And as a leader within the industry, it is important to understand what program management and project management basics you need to have to be able to run the business. That's including people management there as well. Um, the leadership aspect, I, one of the things that I think about as a leader is um, how they approach the thought process of what's happening not only with the problem set, but the surroundings. They have a balance between EQ and IQ,
Hmm.
and there's a distinction on how do I um, connect with people where they are and make sure that they understand where we may have a problem, and we need to develop some solutions and walk through the next space. Now, they may not be the ones to implement every single solution. That may not be their strong suit. Now, I've seen where the two intertwine, and that's where the magic happens, where you have a leader that knows how to manage people. Because let's be real, as human beings, we can be complicated at times. And it's important to understand, okay, we have some policies or different mechanisms we need to utilize to communicate or share what information is in the organization or what's happening in our marketing plan. And so, how do you even build a team? What's that organizational structure? So that way, you surround yourself with the right leaders
Hmm.
and managers to be able to get the job done. And that other area where a leader really kicks in is painting the vision and then being able to come back to the strategy and going back and forth. And even in some aspects, they can come down to the tactics, but they know when to come back up and allow their people, they scale through their people. So that's where I've found the brilliance of the two coming together. And some people have asked me, like, well, is there a choice I have to make between leading people or being an individual contributor? And I think it comes back to personal preference of one, what do you have a passion for? And then two, what is stopping you from leading in both areas? And that's a question that only you can answer yourself, versus someone telling you, oh, you're great at leading this project, you'll be great at leading people. That's not always the case. We've
No.
seen that. And that it's not um and it's not that the person isn't trying, it's just it may not be their strong suit. That they're really good at that individual contributor and bringing ideas to the table, developing strategies, and even doing the research hands on, or even working with vendors or suppliers. It may not be their superpower of leading
Sure.
people as far as managing them in the day to day. Yeah.
Wow. So I think there's a lot to unpack from what you
Mm-hmm.
said.
Mm-hmm.
I loved. I took some notes because I wanted to go back to some of the points. I
Yeah.
think what you said um, is that a manager is a kind of a operator.
Mm-hmm.
They make sure that we go by the book and we execute the plan and we do things. Whereas the leader is someone who's looking around the corners,
That's right.
taking care of the people, making sure that we have an holistic understanding of what's going on. And the best of both worlds is when you have the management skills and the leadership skills merged together, intertwined. So you are able to paint that vision, define the strategy, execute on it, and onboard people as you go,
That's right.
and making sure that everyone has that clarity. Uh, yeah. Okay. So
Yep. That's right.
that's one, and that's why you need EQ and
That's
IQ.
right.
Not only EQ because you need to make sure that you understand what's going on around you and how people are perceiving what you said and the
That's right.
vision. Okay.
That's right. Having those check-in points, being intentional of where your check-in points, and understanding that everyone has a different way of absorbing or taking in information. And I think even in that space, there's a balance between EQ and IQ, knowing your audience and finding multiple ways of communication. Some people are visual. Some people are more of that auditory, and taking it in. Some people are more of that tactile, like they actually need to see you in action. What does this look like? What does this really mean? Can you give some examples? So you have to be able to break it down that whom you have in your leadership team that you've chosen, you understand what their learning styles are. So that way the message continues through them. It doesn't get mistranslated. Does that make sense?
So
Yeah.
yeah, very much. And actually, it brings me back to a great. I mean, one of my favorite episodes with on this show with Daryl
Uh-huh.
Hammett. I mean,
Uh-huh.
about being intentional because that was
Yes.
the thing. There was the key thing, and I've tried to adopt that and be more intentional in my leadership style also. Because you said, I mean, being intentional about building your team, being intentional about how you communicate things to your teams, making sure you have the right individuals, but also the right skill sets and diversity of talents,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure you understand how people absorb what you said, and
That's right.
and, uh, and so they can communicate back to everyone. So and also being intentional about zooming in and zooming out. But you mentioned that earlier. People that are able to move from vision to strategy, sometimes being able to dive deep into the tactics,
That's right.
uh, and um, And there was a very good article on HBR, Harvard Business Review,
Hmm.
some years ago, which is about zooming in and zooming out. I think that was the title. I will find it. And that's exactly that. It explains how you need to be super intentional um, in the way you look at things. So sometimes you step back and try to understand holistically what's going on, and
That's
then
right.
you need to dive deep into okay the details and how everything works, and are people understanding what's going on? Are we moving the needle?
Hmm.
All those type of things.
Yes. No, spot on. And I think this is where if you don't gauge that zooming in and out, the timing matters. That's how long you stay in the in, like too deep. Sometimes you'll lose your people on the journey to say, like, well, they'll take care of it because they always zoom in and they always take over, um, or they may not have an opportunity to learn for themselves. Um, I think even from the opposite of if you're zoomed out too long, you might lose a connection with your team of where the problem sets really are. And I think that comes in that IQ space. For me, I know that I have blind spots or weak spots in certain areas of capability and expertise. At the same time, I still try to read upon and have knowledge points of, okay, well, where would we have the logic breakdown in our software logic? That's not my expertise. At the same time, how do we make sure where do we need to understand there's nodes or controls? Or, I'll geek out here in a little bit, but at
Don't worry.
least where there's determinations when a decision is made of the system, right? And I know for me, I'm not going to go down to the code level. I need to understand with my SDM or my principal SDEs to say, hey, this is what we're seeing. Have we gone through a root cause analysis to understand what the challenges are, and walk through that way with them, so that we can tease it apart. And that, I think, goes a long way. That the team, one, they know I care.
Yeah.
And two, I'm trying to learn more about their world and their area. And okay, how do we find the medium, the happy medium there?
That's good. So just for the audience, SDE stands for Software Developer
Yeah.
Engineer, and SDM Manager.
Yes. Yes.
So the
Sorry.
people
Yeah.
managing a team of engineers. So no
That's
worries,
right.
it's just for clarity. So I have two questions, two follow-up questions on that. One is about timing, and the other one is about mechanism. How do you make sure? So let's talk about mechanism first. I mean, what I'm trying to do through this podcast is really to dive deep
Yeah.
into how leaders are doing this. So we talk about being intentional, being able to, I mean, recognizing the need to zoom in sometimes. So,
Mhm.
what are some of the mechanisms that you have developed? How do you do this on a regular basis and not and don't stay, stuck into the weeds, lost into the weeds, because
That's a
that's
good
easy as
question.
well. Specifically, when you are a geek or someone super passionate about technology, I mean, you want to learn more, but that's not your role anymore. So, how do
That's right.
you zoom back out?
That's a good question. And so to give context for me, I give my leaders a lot of autonomy, to run the business in an aspect of we've we've set our goals and longer term visions, whether it's earlier in the year or a couple years prior, to understand what does it mean to be customer obsessed in this area. And once that's been sort of casted in saying, here's what it looks like each year, that we want to achieve this longer term goal or longer term vision. And in that space, we have monthly business reviews that we dive deeper into where the technology is in its development, or if it's past development, where are we at in getting ready to deploy it, or where is it in the operational aspect? And in those areas, the question always comes back to, is the system performing as intended? Did it meet our expectations that we said for requirements, and also is it continue to meet the customer's expectations? And if that answer comes back as no, then the next one is why not? And then we go in through the deeper space of what's happening within the system, that it's not having the right throughput, or it's not allowing for zero defects, or we just start to dive into some of the problem sets, especially from the operational side. We don't want to keep a system out there that's not
Mhm.
working. And so the way I approach the questions, the mechanism I use in the MBR form, we go through, if something is at risk of failing, or an issue has already been developed, we have a series of, well, I'll call it a heat map, but sort of that priority of what's at risk, what's in an issue space, and what opportunities do we have to make some changes in the system. And it's not so much of me making the decisions. The leaders come to the table to say, here's what we propose. And we go through the questions of why. Why did we propose this? What does it impact? Not only for the system we've developed, but now it's within the larger system. So what's the impact there? So they have to think around the corner, along with that corner being another system, or what's the interdependency? Who are the stakeholders that need to be involved in that deeper conversation? So outside the MBR, then we go into the deep dive. Say something is at risk. Okay, we're gonna triage that. So to me, that's more of that diving deeper into the problem set to understand um, whether it's a root cause of how did we get there, and to make sure we're all on the same page, one, and then to make sure that we have multiple mitigations, because your first mitigation may not work. That's what, that's the point of having multiple options, to say here's at least a couple paths to success, or where we could be back in action with our customer.
Okay.
So that's at least some of the mechanisms I've used before.
All right. Thank you. So, going back to timing, are we? I mean, are you considering, or have you got other mechanisms that are able to detect more in advance
Hmm.
some of the risks? Because I mean, do we have to wait for the MBR where the risks
Yeah,
are explained to react upon it? Or I mean, because timing is always a change.
that's right.
Because it drives, there are some consequences in terms of budget, in terms of customer
Hmm.
satisfaction, in terms of many aspects. So have you got other mechanisms that helps you to zoom in when the time is right?
Yes. And I would say, things that I've used in other parts of the industry as well. Before we release a design, like we're still in the design phase, for example, the questions that we walk through there of, I'll say, early concept, or that preliminary design space is, uh, okay, what are we putting in place that still allows us some of that two-way door decisions, right? And in that space, you you are putting a prototype together, for example. It's still small, it's not impacting downstream or in operations just yet. You're still in testing. And so in that space, you want to be curious, you want to ask the team, and it's not the monthly business review. This is, and for software, some people use Agile. I've used waterfalls. I've used Scrum, as far as for weekly check-ins, to just say, okay, here are the milestones that we've talked through. At least we've set of what success looks like. how are we doing to achieve that? Are we at 30% confidence? Are we at 40%? Are we at 50%? And so that way it allows us a time measure early on.
Mhm.
And with the team, we really push simulation before we get into physical testing and simulation of the model. So that way you're not using up material costs initially. You're not using long lead items to actually take up space in a warehouse somewhere. And so with simulation, it allows more freedom to say where you might have some interferences physically in the layout, and also where you might have from when you mechanize the system, where the control logic might need to dive deeper just a little more. So that's the upfront that we've used here, and I've used in other places as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So you have those mechanisms to identify or to give you some options along the way,
Options
and
and confidence before
confidence.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, because if you don't have that before you get to your physical testing, one, it's a very, very high cost by that time to make a change. And so a change to the system could be a change in the schedule and then a change to what you're delivering to the customer. Um, but even back to your point of, do we have to, once something is delivered and it's operational? No, we don't wait just for monthly business reviews. We have, I call them dashboards, but we have the current state visualization of how is the system performing, and even pre-indicators back when we set our design to say, okay, this motor, for example, is going to give out after so many revolutions. Okay, well, we're coming up on those revolutions. So what do we do for maintenance to make sure we're doing some preventative work there in that space too?
Yeah. So if I zoom out a bit from this engineering discussion for the benefit of other leaders in other spaces, I think what you're saying is that we need mechanism to be able to inspect
That's right.
the work. We need some analytics to understand your KPIs or
Hmm.
how everything works, and that's important to have an eye on those dashboards to understand how, I mean, the momentum, things are things progressing the way you would expect them, and
That's right.
is there a deviation? And that's irrespective of your field. I mean, if you're in sales, that could be the same, where
That's
you
right.
look at your sales pipeline, you look at how many of them are converting. Are we linear in the way we progress through the quarter? So that's for sales. It could be for marketing, different aspects. So having
That's correct.
that data, being data driven as a leader is important.
It is. And I think you're spot on for understanding what the data is telling you, and then how do you utilize it for running the business. And to your point, there's so many opportunities that we're still learning from of how to communicate across multiple functions or multiple areas. So, for example, if the marketing or finance or the topology teams that are out looking at what's happening in the community or industry, right? What's happening from a sales aspect. And then how does that impact? Okay, well, we had a plan to design and develop this many systems. Well, we need more or we need
Yeah.
less. And so those mechanisms are important. If they know sooner, they let us know sooner, so that we can dial accordingly.
All right. That's good. I want to go back to the big question I asked early already, and we had a mini touch points on what makes great leaders. So I think you said that they are showing up holistically. They are using the data. They are using mechanism. Um, I want to discuss also about something that you mentioned and that we skipped a bit is about timing and how to move fast, because that's one of the challenges I'm facing right now, and
Hmm.
and uh, I think we have opportunities, or my group has an opportunities to move faster on things. And you mentioned one very Amazonian term, which is one-way door and two-way doors.
Oh, yes.
So I think that would be interesting to dive into this. And if you can tell us how you do, how, how do you make sure that your team is moving fast enough?
Hmm. Uh, that is always a hard one to gauge of what is fast enough. Um, and what I've come to, and I'm still a work in progress. I'll put that out there. But what I've come to is that when you get to a solution set that the customer already has, you're late. Like that that's not being disruptive. It's not, if it's not going to be an improvement, or why would you put it out there? I think when you continue to work backwards from the customer's problem space, and that you can understand, where do I have multiple opportunities to be disruptive in a positive way, right? Disruptive, that it thinks ahead a couple steps before they've even asked for something. It not only answers the question or the problem that they have today, but it's also going to resolve something else that may come along. So that is where, when you think about who your visionary people are on your team, they aren't just pie in the sky. They really are diving into where problem sets are today, and then where could they evolve to. It's not a guarantee. It's just to say where they could go, and that they have that foresight to understand, how do we paint that picture. That's one. When you have that, then that allows us to work backwards into, well, what do we have today in our toolkit or slash portfolio that answers some, all of it, none of it, and how do we go after? Then that gives you a sense of timing. If I have something today that gets us 80% there, okay, I can potentially get a two pizza team to quickly say, like, how much change would this be to offset, or a two pizza team, a small team, that can move quickly, to really address, to go from 80% can give you that 90%, 95% solution, for the customer's problem. That team can also help you to say, like, oh, you are not 80% close. You are closer to 50%. And it's going to take X amount of time potentially for you to get to a solution set. And then, of course, if they say, oh, no, we don't have anything in our portfolio, well, then that lets you know, okay, who are my other areas of capability or experts that I need to bring in to say, I want you to redefine, like, here's the problem set. I want you to redefine what a solution could look like. Um, so that's at least how I've thought through how you can approach, sort of, how much time do I really have, to make it, to that customer's problem set.
Mhm.
So that way it gives you some horizon tiers of, I could provide a solution in this one tier, or that 1 to 2 year space. And my next tier is like the 2 to 4-ish year, maybe. That might be the bigger problem. And then if it's something that doesn't exist today, I mean, when you think about, like, we're in 2023, it's crazy. And so I'm going to date myself a little bit. When you think about where cell phones have come, right? We have many computers on hand at all times, with satellites always connecting us, cell towers that are local. Um, that took some time. Like, that to me was a longer term solution that someone was thinking about, of, well, where could it go next? But where are we at? Where are we at today? It was those brick briefcases that
Yeah.
we had back then to start, but now it's like, really small mini, um, handheld devices, touchscreen, what? And some of the flip phones are coming back, but that's another debate. But um, it's interesting to see again the visionaries that could have the right experts come together to say, what does reality look like in the next couple years? What does it look like for my 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 year time frame? And then that way we can have a better gauge to say, well, this is how we could actually be disruptive in this space. Because to play it safe, like for the market, when you look at how much margins do we have for looking at the retail space, and it depends on which part of the retail. Amazon has quite a bit of the retail space today, but it took visionaries to think through how do we even dominate, not so much dominate, but how do we achieve that space? How do we make sure that people want to come and have um, a customer experience with us? And that's of course evolving all the time, and now there's different parts of the business that we're continuing to evolve in as well to delight our customers.
Yeah, and it's always day one. It's
That's right. That's right.
it's only the beginning of. I mean, we don't dominate. We are. I mean, a big player
Hmm.
and trying
Hmm.
to learn. But
That's
that's
right.
good. So if I'm trying to summarize, so I think we went a bit different on a different path, but that was interesting. Nonetheless, very interesting because what I think what you said is that you need a vision of what could come next, and
Hmm.
you have to decide how you can get there. And from sounds of it, it sounds that it can be an iterative process. Say, okay, this is what I have in my toolbox right now, and in the future we want to get there, but we will build over time that capability.
Right. You could do that. And then, I mean, there could be a decision to say, we don't have anything today. And here's the big leap that we're going to take to
Yeah,
achieve that space. We want to go after that first because no one else in the market takes takes that space. So this is where we want to be disruptive. So I think that's that bigger timing. And yes, to come back to your question on how do we know if we're going fast enough? Um, I One of the things that I share with my team is, yes, we set goals for ourselves. If we are comfortable, mm, we might be going towards that mm, longer time span versus what does it look like for us to be uncomfortable but sure of, and sure meaning confident in what we're delivering to the customer, right? It's not going to be 100%, and this is where I love my engineers. Sometimes we get a little overzealous and we say we want 99.9%, reliability, and I'm like, is it really going to be 99.9%? And what's the impact? Could we get to 97%? Does how what is the error rate? So we start toggling back and forth of what does that give you? If it doesn't impact the customer and it doesn't impact overall operations, do we need to make that next leap of perfection, right?
yeah,
And a lot of times it's not to perfection, it's making sure that we still have high quality with no or zero defects and no safety issues, right? Like period. Um, I think that's the part where we are always trying to make sure, okay, we got to gauge our timing on that versus perfection. So that's the part that I balance with my team, especially early in the design space. So we're not um, iterating too many times on a design because that might mean maybe we didn't understand the customer's requirements up front, and we just need to re-level set in that space and be careful of how we're spending our resources because they're not unlimited.
sure. So trying to zoom out, it sounds like said that the way you operate is that you have a set of non-negotiable,
Mm-hmm.
like security is job zero,
That's right.
and safety, customer satisfaction, and then you are trying to play with the different levels to make sure that you are moving fast enough and
Mm-hmm.
delivering the vision. But okay,
That's right.
and then making sure that your team doesn't go too crazy on the towards the perfection, but there's the bias for action, as we say here
That's
at
right.
Amazon, where we're moving. We're moving. That's always important for us to move.
That's right. That's right. Yes, and it's important. Of course, my business partners slash business teams, they keep a pulse on me as well. And I keep a pulse with them too. And so it's making sure that you're understanding where we need to sometimes redirect if we have had a change in the industry for some reason or in the market per se.
For some reason, what you described reminds me of the book from Jeffrey Moore called Escape Velocity.
Oh yeah,
Different horizons, and then you all need to be disruptive, but so you need to have those big bets that are long term, and but you need to iterate on this and discover. So,
that's right. Yes,
great book,
yeah, that's a
great
good
book.
book. Yes.
Okay, so what makes great leaders? They are showing up holistically. They're using data, using mechanism. They are helping their team move fast enough. So understanding how to get to this long-term vision and whilst delivering results.
Mhm.
Uh, you have your non-negotiables as well. So to make sure that we are all on the same page and we are moving all in the same direction.
That's right. And I think the part that um, I would say helps encompass that of as a leader, sometimes you have to wear different hats. Sometimes you have to wear a coaching hat. Sometimes it's a mentoring hat. Sometimes it's a um, manager hat. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Um, and understanding when to make those trades is important. And again, because we're talking about people in this space and leading people to help us achieve what our customers need. So that means just as obsessed as we are with our customers, we have to be employee obsessed as well, to the point that we naturally just understand like, okay, here are the tools from my coaching toolkit of helping people see things from a different veranda to pull like what's within them out to say no, let's unpack that a little bit. Why are you telling yourself that? And tell me more of
Mhm.
what else is going on behind the scenes. And then from a manager aspect, okay, yeah, you might have to set those expectations to say my expectations are the following, and this is what we agreed to together, right? Here's what we said the goals would be, and you did or did not deliver on that. I want to understand why, and here's what it looks like to keep moving forward. And, when it's those kind of conversations of understanding how to balance, I think people people will enjoy working versus when we miss the timing of someone's being a manager and very tactical at times, or not understanding where to lean in. If there's an inflection in someone's voice or posture, they're not looking themselves or coming to the table as they normally would and asking the why behind that, you might lose in the retention of the person and they might not think you care about them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I have had discussion with very related to what you just said. I have had discussion with some leaders the past weekend,
Mhm.
uh, about traits. What you explain, we're wearing different hats, and
Hmm.
when you need to be a mentor, a coach, or manager, in the sense of, okay, you were expecting to deliver this, you have not, so what's going on? And I feel that finding the right balance is difficult, and we were discussing that it's specifically with what happened with COVID,
Hmm.
and also a lot of social problems around around inclusivity, and making sure that everyone. Some people are becoming, or some managers are becoming too. Uh, it doesn't sound good, but easy on people, meaning that they are
Hmm.
not holding people accountable enough.
Right. Right.
And because, I mean, so, and we were discussing that some people are really good at taking advantage of that, because oh yeah, I they come up with some good reasons,
Hmm.
so, and I feel it's difficult for some people, including myself, from time to time, to really hold people accountable. So, do you have a good recipe for making sure that, yeah, we remain employee obsessed, we remain,
Hmm.
leaders in the way that we are going to inspire people, we take care of them, we try to show up holistically, understanding everything. But at the same time, when something is wrong, because they have not delivered what they committed
Right.
to, or missing a deadline, whatever, we hold them accountable.
Yes, and that's a good point around the accountability. I'll back up just a little bit to say when we talk about accountability, it's not punitive. We're not
Yeah.
letter of the law. No, what we're trying to understand is there was an agreement of here's what we need to deliver on. We all said yes, and at least the business said yes. The team got along board, and individuals knew what their tasks or assignments were, and within their capabilities. Now, it may be a stretch for some, and that's where one-on-one we understand, like, where's the stretch? Is this out of their wheelhouse? Is that why they're not making their deliverables? Do they need some help? But instead of guessing, that's where it's important. For me, I have regular one-on-ones with my reports. I have biweeklies, just to have check-ins, and they may be 15 minutes, they may be 30 minutes, and some weeks they may be longer. Like you were talking about during the pandemic, uh, sometimes we just never talked about work. It was, okay,
Yeah.
what's going on? And to your point, it was not always about a pandemic of illness from the COVID aspect, but it was social unrest, which
Yeah.
was a pandemic in itself, right? And I wanted to make sure, okay, now I understand what's disturbing or disrupting their output. Okay, what is it that I can help, or at least provide resources that the company may have, or they just need a day to reset, refresh? Okay, I can help with that. But I have to have the conversation first versus making assumptions. And I
Yes.
think sometimes those in a leadership space, we have to be careful not to assume, and we have to have the conversation. Now, that's one piece. The other piece, or other side, might be you have people that you've had conversations with, and a little bit to your point, Roman, of they have a story, or something happens on a regular basis. Well, this role that is important to have the deliverables completed may not be the role for them. It may be something else. So then you have a different conversation of, okay, if they're meeting some of the deliverables and it's not their sweet spot or their capabilities, maybe it's something else that they need to dive deeper in. What's their passion areas as well. Now, I'll be real transparent, and I know we are on a recording. If there is someone that just flat out is, um, and this happens very rarely, that they're just blatant that I don't want to do it, and they're blaming somebody else, and they're just um, not stepping up to their own responsibilities, then that's a totally different conversation of how do we take care of what's happening in this space that is not disrupting the team, because in that aspect you're probably going to look at your engagement scores of your team and see that there's other things happening and this person is not supporting where the culture is going longer term for the team. So we have to keep our eyes out in those conversations of, okay, what's really happening? Is it they're just in a space today, or is it a capabilities aspect, or is it um, they're just not connecting with the expectations, nor are they ready to perform those roles, and you need to take the next steps.
Yeah, I like what you said, that it should not be a judgment, and for that, the mechanism that you have is that you have regular one-on-ones to checking with the team to understand what's going on, to understand, to get this holistic understanding, and
Hmm.
you are intentional about having those discussions. So if you see that there's a trend
That's
for
right.
lower performance,
Hmm.
you can react to it, but it's important that you have those regular touch points, so you keep setting expectations, and if there's a disconnect, this is where you need to act upon, and time is the essence as well, because
That's right.
yeah, I found
Yeah.
that many cases, many managers just let go and say, oh yeah, I've seen that, okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
they have a pass, but it doesn't help on the longer term, because for several reasons. I think it can demotivate others who are
That's
seeing the bad performance or bad behavior from others, and
that's right.
they are not facing any consequences,
Hmm.
and some of the people, I mean, it becomes the norm
That's right.
basically. Yeah. And that's the change.
Yeah. No, it's when the manager, and I changed the language, and the
Yep.
manager of the person becomes numb to what's happening in the environment, um, it may be time for them to take a reset to say, how how do I need to show up so that I can step into that leadership role to say, okay, what's happening with my team, engaging with each other, and then engaging what expectations we have to meet our customers' needs. Um, and I've seen it, you've seen it, where it can be demotivating, to your point, to others in the team if you don't, the morale, all the above, if you don't address it, um, it can, what is it? Culture eats, you know, any any business objectives, all day long. It'll just take it out of perspective, and not being able to achieve what you have for goals for that year or even beyond that.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Hmm.
So to close up on the topic of what makes great leaders, so we talk about showing up holistically, using the data mechanism, holding people accountable, but having that clear understanding of and curiosity, being intentional about being curious,
Hmm.
knowing your people and what's going on. So you are not making assumptions.
That's right.
Another point that you brought when we prepared that a discussion was leaders come with their own artifacts. Can you tell us more about that?
Mm, yeah, I that's a That one is interesting. When I heard that, I was like, what does that mean? And meaning that we all show up in a different space, right? We all come with um, different levels of capability or different experiences, and so it's important when we come into a new environment where we're gauging of, okay, well, what's what's today? What's at current state space? And understanding what your plan might be for that first 30 days to get to know your team, get to know your people, right? At least that's one of the 30, 60, 90-day artifacts that I know leaders can use.
Yeah.
And other artifacts or tools that we bring to the table, we all have different um, types of ways we use them in the past as well. For example, how do we highlight what our talent in those that are capable or those that we want to showcase? How do we share that with other leaders within the organization so that when the time comes for that retention and development, hey, don't forget about this person that we were talking about before a couple months ago. I think they'd be great for this opportunity. And so, whether it's profile piece that you have, or I know there's other people experience tools that there are available into our company and outside of our company. So those are different artifacts and tools that leaders sometimes bring into uh, the organization. I think the part for um, how a leader shows up for themselves, it's at least for the artifacts that I operate with, is how do I make sure that I'm pausing enough before I'm responding to my team or answers in a meeting. And we are fortunate that we have some tips in like little PDFs in meeting rooms, but in the virtual space, it's tough because you you're thinking and it's like, oh, what do I? Mm, okay, don't formulate your thought all the time before you're not even listening to the person. So
Yeah.
how do you have the right um, mental model of showing up in a meeting and making sure that you're hearing out another person or persons' perspectives before they finish their statement, right?
Yeah.
I think that's critical. Um, I know the artifact that we use as a company to help level set some of that is, of course, the narrative that we use to say, okay, here's what the proposal or whatever is going on to help level set so that people aren't coming or guessing what their own formulations are to the problem set immediately, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's different artifacts or tools that leaders bring to the table, but it's important to understand like what where your team is in that current state before you just dump in a whole new set of ways of operating or connecting with each other.
Yeah. Uh, that's that's great. And you mentioned meta models. That's something I discovered at Amazon. I was not used to it before in other leadership role, and I find them super powerful.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to find someone to talk about mental models, and having some examples because I found them super powerful to
Hmm.
scale uh, to scale as an organization to do, and as a leader also throughout this.
Yeah, yeah. I had a coach, two coaches, but one specifically. He was dynamic, and it was crazy because that wasn't like his day job. His day job was something else within like the systems engineering aspect. But his superpower was how to help people create mental maps, like how to navigate that space and where there's natural connections or those nodes that happen that may spark, or sometimes people say trigger, but spark an idea or thought. Um, and how do you unpack that in a way that you can translate it so someone else can understand, but unpack it to where it's okay. Well, let me get this down in a, a logical way that I can then try to formulate it. But it was really interesting, and I'm trying to. I'm like, I have a book and I will find it. I'll send it to you.
Okay. Nice.
Um, oh, I think it's actually Think Fast and Slow. Thinking Fast
Oh
and Think
yeah.
Slow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great book.
Yep. That one he had recommended to me, and there's one other one, but yeah, he was brilliant in how to unpack those areas of just how do you slow your mind down, and then how, to your point earlier, of how do you make sure we're hitting the mark on certain decisions and what's critical or urgent in some areas.
Cool. Thank you. That's a great conclusion for the topic of what makes great leaders. And moving on to the next topic, then we wanted to discuss about. I've had discussion with several leaders
Mhm.
where we agreed that leadership is sometimes lonely. And what you told me when we discussed the first time is that it doesn't have to be.
That's right.
So, on the topic of working with peers in the workplace, can you what can you share with us?
Yes, and when you brought that up the last time, it made me pause and smile because my whole life I heard, it's lonely at the leadership top, and I said, "Mm." Until for me, I always had the question of why. Why does it have to be lonely? And I think there's a couple things of, well, what what do you allow in your space that gives you comfort and knowing that you're not alone, one.
Yeah,
And then two, um, how do you make sure that you're helping others in their space and in their journeys as well. It may not be quote unquote in your at your table or at the level that you're at, but you're continuing to help people elevate. And for example, you had asked about peers that I work with, and now and in the past. Um, I understand competition, right? My definition of compete is we've come alongside each other to sharpen each other to make a better resolution or solution set for our customer, not to um, combat or take over one another's
take over.
space.
Yeah,
I don't look at competition that way, and I some people do, and that's their prerogative. But I'd rather figure out, okay, well, what's this other person's strong set? What's their capabilities? Okay, how can I complement them, or how can they complement me to make sure that we are developing the best solution? Because as Amazon sometimes says, two is better than none. Okay, there's two of us in this space, and where are we in the journey, right? How do we understand where, okay, this system, for example, is a little bit further in its development, but here's where there's risk or issues, and vice versa. Okay, then we make a decision to say, actually, we need to support this model more, or we need to support the other model more, and make the decision to say, this is where the resources need to go,
yeah,
and not get in the space of, I didn't build that. That's not my model. And I'm it's almost like being in the sandbox with adults sometimes, and I'm like, no, I I'm not trying to take your toy. I want to make sure we can have new toys or new ideas and different things coming to the table. But that's, in a funny way. But the reality is that sometimes as humans, we allow selfishness to creep in. And as leaders, there's no room for selfishness. we have to continue to be selfless.
Yeah.
That does
I
not
love
mean
that.
we are doormats and let people run over us. No, it's to make sure that we understand how are we serving, leading, supporting, honoring people, and at the same time showing up to make sure, okay, this is what I know I have capabilities in, but I know this other person has more capabilities here. So how do I bring them into our space to say, hey, I want your expertise, I want your knowledge here, and you give them credit where credit is due
Yeah.
versus taking it for yourself.
Yeah, I love what you said about leaders are selfless. We should be selfless, and I think it reminds me of two things. The first one is Patrick Lencioni's book, Five Dysfunction of a Team,
Yes,
where at the basis of this pyramid to get really performing teams is trust,
that's right.
and from there, this is where you can build those relationships that are making 1 + 1 3, right?
Mhm.
Or that
Mhm.
makes you better, but also that you allow each other to change um, each other and
Right.
yourself, and making sure that we are going always. We are becoming better at what we do. And that
Mhm.
reminds me of a podcast I've listened recently on Lenny's podcast. I don't know whether you know it. It's a great podcast about
Okay.
products, and they interviewed uh, Brian Balfour, who is
Okay.
a CEO of a company, and I love the way he explained that he's looking for spare partners. Like in sports where you are practicing, you are becoming better thanks
That's right.
to the the competitor,
Mhm.
but it's not in a competition. It's more in a way to become better together.
That's
And
right.
I love that thing that and that's why also I feel that as a leader you need to be intentional, not to be lonely. And
Yes.
because as you said, it doesn't have to be, but it's it's actually super powerful to share our concerns with our peers. I have at least three peers that I am very close, and we are sharing, and we trust each other, and I'm becoming better thanks to them
Mhm.
on many aspects.
Mhm.
So I found that super powerful indeed
Yeah,
to have that spare partner, to have those spare partners.
that's right. It's and some people ask the question of, well, I have the sparring partners and those that I connect with. Does that mean that they're my friends? They may or may not be. But to your point of building trust, that means you have a different level of connecting with them, that they have your back versus you have to watch your back. If you are walking into a meeting or into a room that you feel like no one has your back, okay, one, let's do some self reflection to see, is it, self isolation, or is it an environment that doesn't promote um, a sense of trust amongst each other? And if that's the case, then everyone needs to have that point of understanding, is there something that I can do to help cultivate the soil that I'm in, that I can be the seed or water or the neutralizer, whatever it might be. And if I can't, maybe it's not, the soil isn't quite ready for what you're bringing to the table to help build that trust, or to make sure that there's a sense of community, for
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that. The strength of community team actually
Hmm.
is really powerful, because I really think that we can do much more thanks to each other, and because
Hmm.
and specifically if the team has been designed in a way that is inclusive and
Right.
representing different perspectives. I see a lot of value in that.
That's right. Yeah, definitely.
Uh, yeah, going back to you, Daryl, again. I mean, I like the analogy that you used to say, so talking with peers, say, oh, you play baseball, and I play basketball. So let me teach you basketball. You can teach me baseball, and we become better as a team together.
Hmm.
And and recognizing that everyone has fortes and something can learn, but also you can give uh, back. I think it's very good.
That's right. Definitely. Yeah, it's funny. I'm like, I don't play sports except for I've done softball, and it's interesting to learn the mechanisms of the game. And I've had older colleagues or previous colleagues that I've had that would just help me understand, like, this is how you work as a team in that space. And I'm like, oh, okay. And apply some of those analogies in the day to day of a teaming space has been helpful as well.
Yeah, true.
This is good. You got a lot of good
Yeah,
questions here.
yeah, thank you. So the tough one. What does it take to become a director? I mean,
Oh,
when you move from middle management to more senior leadership.
I, I know when you look at the job descriptions, each company has their own sort of, here are our expectations, here's what we would like in a candidate. Uh, One of the things, or some of the things that you'll see to me that show up consistently is, yes, you know how to develop strategies that go cross functionally, that go across a full, not just organization, but multiple parts of the company. And even if it's a small company, medium or larger size company, but you're going across multiple areas for that strategy, and you're understanding what the problem set is for your customers or whomever your consumer is, and you're working backwards from that space to develop plans that are not just short-term gains. They have to be long-term. And some people are like, oh, long-term, a year. I'm like, no, beyond a year. it it's got to show a roadmap of, here's where we could go longer term, because we're not in it for short-term gains. We want to be here 10 years, 20 years from now. We may not understand what the problem set is, what that 20-year or 10-year
Yeah,
space may be, but we know that there's some areas that should be uncovered and developed. And so, what does that roadmap, whether it's in the technology space, whether it's in the business applications, or where it's in our consumer management slash customer management, our engagement space, um, and even when it comes to that organizational experience or people experience, we cannot have short term gains only. And I put the caveat there because I also want to know, what do you do in that 30, 60,
yeah,
90 days to come in and mechanize to say, hey, I want to get some quick wins to bring people, one, get to know them, and then two, um, have them bring me up to speed of where we are, and making sure they understand where we need to go longer term. And that that does take a balance of, okay, short term, quick space of coming into an organization. So they want to understand, how do you do that? How do you gain the trust of people? Because you don't take trust, you gain trust of your
yeah,
people up front. And depending on the role, you even if you're in technology, you still need to understand the business. Like, what's your portfolio? What's the size of your portfolio? How much do you need from a resource aspect? So you need to be able to share how you've developed those types of artifacts or manage those areas as well. Um, and you definitely need to have a balance between EQ and IQ. More and more companies, I've seen them shift from IQ only and they forget about the people and how sometimes leaders land, they can't afford to have a high turnover. And so they want to make sure there's a balance between the two, and show that you've been able to lead other leaders.
Yeah.
I think that's the other big piece of directors, of you're leading other leaders as well as the team, right? So that cascading model, how do you show that you're able to scale through your leaders, through the people on your team? Because as we talked earlier, you shouldn't be pulsing down all the time. You should be able to understand, okay, this is where we are. Where do I need to intentionally pulse? Where there's not only critical times, but prior to critical times, so the team feels your connection as well. I think
Yeah.
I think that's and depending on the role, you'll have some specialties, right, that you would need to understand. Like if you're in supplier management, how have you engaged negotiations or operations of vendors, things like that. But you need to show back to how you've developed mechanisms for operating in that area. What are your performance indicators of showing how you've ran the business? How do you ensure that you've got an understanding of where your risk issues, opportunities are, how to develop mitigations. Um, and again, it may not be you doing that through all of your experience. It's how are you leading people in that space, but you understand how it works, and you may have some experience yourself operating in
Yeah.
those areas too.
I think one of my mentor told me once that his mentor
Hmm.
told him some years ago that when they were uh, they wanted to move to the next level,
Uh-huh.
so they told my mentor that you should not come to me with your plate full. You should come to me once you have your plate half full, because which means basically that there's a tendency for people to take on too much work and too much work, and
Yes.
that's what
Yeah.
that's and they expect to be promoted as a result.
Right.
And what from that story, what I'm uh, uh, getting is that if you are able to scale through others, you can demonstrate that and deliver results. Of course, you have more bandwidth to take on
Hmm.
more changing work and stretch yourself to the next level and eventually becoming going to that promotion level.
That's right. Now that's a good analogy of having capacity within your your operating leadership space. I kudos to your mentor, and it makes me think about, yes, having those mentors and coaches in your corner to tell you, nope, you're off or on in certain areas, or nope, it's time to think about another opportunity. It's good to have them in your corner, because they can advocate for you sometimes in conversations that you can't for yourself, because you're not privy to those discussions at times. Some people call them sponsors, or advisors, and versus mentors and coaches in some places too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for this. I think we are reaching the end of the episode, so I
Hmm.
want to go to the last round of questions. So, how do you keep learning and growing as a leader?
Oh, good. I think so. I learned through my team. I try to find what keeps them curious or inquisitive in some areas. So we talked about within like machine learning or data analytics. Those are areas that I'm a novice in. At the same time, it's a part of my day to day. What's the latest processors that we're using, and to make sure, okay, are we thinking ahead of what else is in the industry? So I look at different industry digests or industry journals that I get online. And then for like leadership materials, I look at both, I guess, different sectors of leadership material. Sometimes there's podcasts that I
Mhm.
use, that I listen to. I love Brene Brown.
Oh
For
yeah, yeah.
me, she's dynamic in not only IQ, she's very brilliant in that psychology space, but the EQ, right? How are we diving deeper in that space? Um, I listen to different spiritual leaders as well, just to make sure that I'm understanding how my cup needs to be full, that I'm not giving on an empty, versus I'm giving in an overflow space.
Okay.
And yeah, I love learning. I have to gauge and tell myself, I don't need another degree. I I don't need another certificate. I just need to keep some knowledge points, that keep me satisfied of the itch to go back to school.
All right. Thank you. How do you have a book to recommend or a another type of artifact that you found so interesting that you would like to share it with all your friends or your colleagues? Is there a video or podcast?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I was looking at my bookshelf earlier today, and I know I talked about Brene Brown. I'm glad she recreated her podcast series. She was out for a little bit, but that's one um, leader, to me, like the tools as a leader of understanding that EQ space. I think she has some tools that can help us unpack and how to quantify what's happening in some of those areas as well. That's the part that I like understanding, not only the qualitative but quantitative, like how can I measure some of this. So I feel like she's a good leader, the podcast. And the last book that I got was the Atlas of the Heart. It's a good one, and I think some people are like, oh, the one before that was better. I'm not up for debate. I just like all of her books. So definitely, take a in the hardcover or paperback. Um, it has it has some other visuals or
Oh,
connections for
okay.
people there too. So that's that's a good one. Um, I am always going back to Stephen Covey. Some of
Sure.
his, like, to me, they're timeless, in some of those areas. And then I have some servant leadership books as well, that I've read into. And I'm trying to think the latest one. Oh, uh, I'm like, here it is. I have it here. The Light We Carry, Michelle Obama.
Oh, yeah.
The light we carry, and I think some of the things, there's so many things to unpack from there. I'm not saying that I am um, promoting her book. It's understanding as a person, and in some aspects as a leader, it's important to understand how we show up, and it is okay to not be in a perfection. So nobody is perfect. We have to understand to give ourselves grace and to give others grace, and
Mhm.
to understand in the areas that we dive into, we will have a different season, a different journey. All, but we have to understand, like, how are we checking in, and the levels of responsibilities may change, and that weight on our shoulders sometimes will change through that space. But how do we continue to be light here on Earth through that space as well?
That's very good. That's very good. I will put that on my list. I'm not a U.S. citizen, but I'm a big fan of Barack Obama as well. I think
Yeah.
the way he talks about leadership, and I
Hmm.
think it is very inspiring. And I don't expect less from Michelle.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with you. Oh, Roman, this has been wonderful. Thank you for having me
Yeah.
today.
So the last question of the show would be, what other leaders should I interview next? Who would you
Ooh.
recommend?
That's a good one. You know, there's a couple leaders. One, I would say Jason Andrews. He's over on the AWS side.
Jason. Of course I know him. I
Uh,
know him. I know him.
yeah, he's Jason. He's a dynamic leader, and he's a quiet, powerful leader. So that might be something to ask him about. Um, the other one, Fred McPherson. He's out of the operations side. He's a general manager out of the Detroit area. He's a good leader. And the one outside of the company, um, Trisha Lacaux. Last name is Lacaux. I can get you her connection and connect you to. But she's a force to be reckoned with,
Okay.
and very respectful in how she does it. So, powerful leader.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate everything you shared today. I asked a lot of questions, but
That's all
you were
right.
brilliant. You were brilliant at answering them. So thank you so much for your time.
No, thanks, Roman. Take care.
Take care.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. You stayed until the end. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Paid Forward Society. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share it with at least 2 people who would benefit from this discussion. Your support helps me reach more people and make a greater impact. You can also help me get discovered by leaving a 5-star rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. I appreciate your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you. Bye.